let me know if you can relate to this. In your early teens, you were an avid reader. Harry Potter, Hunger Games, Discworld, all that shit. But then as you progressed into the later part of high school and college, your reading habit just sort of petered out. I mean, sure, you might have read what you were forced to by school, but other than that, you pretty much stopped reading long form altogether. Maybe it was caused by the crushing boredom of school-assigned books, or maybe it was crowded out by something like video games or social media. But this sort of pattern, it happened to me, and it happens to a lot of people that I know. Now, fortunately, in the middle of last year, in the middle of 2019, I started reading properly again, and I started, for the first time in years, really, really enjoying a reading habit. In September of last year, I began to track the books I'd read in a little grey notebook, with one page for each book. And in September of this year, I went back and counted 64 entries. And I have some thoughts about my experience. Now, this isn't going to be a video about how to establish a reading habit and read 60 books a year. I'm not Nathaniel Drew or Thomas Frank or John Fish or Better Ideas or Matt D'Avella, but I will have a few tips here for you if you are looking to read more. Now, my first tip is that the secret to reading a lot, as with almost everything else in life, is consistency. I read probably 90 minutes a day on average over the last year, usually right before bed. And if you want to read a lot, you're going to have to come to peace with the fact that you're not going to do it by ignoring a book all week and then trying to power through 8 hours on a Sunday. You've got to make it a habit. Now, my second tip is that if you're not enjoying a book, you just stop reading it. You know, there's a bit of a stigma about not finishing books that you start, but honestly, you're not going to be able to establish a reading habit if you hate what you're reading. Now, I'm a big advocate of pushing through a book that might be challenging you mentally, but not in pushing through a book that you just don't find interesting. My third tip is that it's a really good idea to set a specific time each day when you are going to read, and you set that time aside and you treat it like any other appointment. For me, it was usually between 10 p.m. and midnight on weekdays, and it really helps you to power through those difficult books and to keep that consistency up, because after a while, heading to bed and picking up that book just becomes an automatic act. Now, my final tip is that it's totally okay to read only quote-unquote easy books, at least until you can get your reading habit going. There are enough incredible, enthralling, life-changing, easy books out there to last you a long, long time. James Joyce can wait. Okay, so with that crash course in reading a lot out of the way, it's time to get on to my more general thoughts about what I've managed to achieve over the last year. I know, I'm making a video bragging about how much I've read over the last year, and the first thing I do is tell you that I probably read too much, but bear with me. Once I got on a bit of a roll with this rapid reading, I started to feel a bit of pressure not to break the streak, as it were. Now, normally with habit building, this is a good thing. You don't want to break the streak of going to the gym or whatever, but I got so used to finishing at least a book or two a week that I started to feel pressure and get frustrated when I was reading a book that I perceived as taking too long. Now, while this pseudo-competitive sort of streak-based mindset was a motivator to me during a time where I probably needed quite a bit of motivation, it's something that I want to try and leave behind as I move into my next year of reading, and now that my habit is pretty firmly cemented. When this mindset takes control, I find myself choosing books based on their length or accessibility, not actually on their merit or how much I think that I'm going to enjoy them. In the coming year, I want to be able to read a 500-page book without worrying that it might take me a couple of weeks to finish. When I first started reviving my reading habit, I think I had this concept that one of the biggest benefits is that it would expose me to new and interesting ideas. And while this was definitely the case, I think there was an aspect of it that I wasn't quite expecting. I think most people think that when you read, you receive these fully formed ideas from individual books. You read a book on habit change, for example, and you receive this complete package, this full framework that you can implement exactly as it is in the book in your life, and that's where the benefit comes from. While I found that this is sometimes true, like for me one of those books is Cal Newport's Deep Work, what I find more often is the case is that what I end up thinking about and adopting in my own life is more of a synthesis, something that's sort of a piecemeal construction made up of ideas that I've gotten from a number of different books across genres and even fiction and non-fiction. My personal productivity philosophy, for example, comes not a whole cloth from, say, David Allen's Getting Things Done, but is more of an unholy conglomerate of little tips and bits of information from maybe half a dozen authors. And I kind of take the bits that resonate with me and discard the rest, creating sort of my own little patchwork quilt of other people's ideas. In my experience, at least, the real benefit of the ideas that you're exposed to through reading come from connecting disparate ideas from different fields and not from taking a particular author's framework whole cloth. This is my Kindle. It's old as sin, something like second generation, and I must admit that I only bothered to dig it out of the cupboard during lockdown when all the libraries closed and I had no other options for getting new books. I don't have anything against e-readers per se. I'm no Puritan, and I really do appreciate how useful they are to a lot of people, and this is something that I've really come to appreciate over the last year. It's the fact that nothing really does beat a real paper book. This is a copy of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales that I found buried in a used bookstore near where I live. It's beaten up and it's tattered, but I love it, mostly for this note on the inside cover. Books, for me, over the last year, have become kind of a cool, collectible object. The older, the better. This collection of poetry had a previous life in Dublin before I was born, before I even existed, and on the other side of the world, this very object was living in some stranger's bookshelf, as loved by them as it is by me now. Physical books are amazing objects, visually, tactily, and even olfactorily. The last year has demonstrated to me, more than ever before, the joy of the bound book. This year of reading for me has been a really transformational experience in a lot of ways. I've learned a lot more about subjects that I'm really interested in. I've managed to find a lot more subjects to be interested in, and I intend to continue reading as much as I possibly can. You should try it.